There is a bunch of herbs sitting in your refrigerator right now. Maybe cilantro, maybe parsley, maybe basil in a plastic clamshell that you bought 4 days ago for a single recipe. You used a handful. The rest went soft in the drawer, turned yellow by Wednesday, and ended up in the compost by Friday. 3.49 for 4 days, for a handful of leaves you used once. Now multiply that by every bunch of herbs you buy across a year. Parsley for the soup, cilantro for the tacos, basil for the pasta, rosemary for the roast chicken, thyme for the braise. Most families spend between $150 and $250 per year on fresh herbs, and throw away more than half of what they buy because herbs sold in grocery store bunches do not stay fresh long enough to be fully used. Here is what I want you to picture instead. You are making dinner on a Tuesday night. The pasta needs basil. You reach 6 inches to your left, pinch 3 leaves off a plant sitting on your kitchen windowsill, and put them directly into the pan. No grocery run, no plastic clamshell, no wilted brown edges. 3 seconds from plant to pan, and the plant will have grown those 3 leaves back by the end of the week. That is not a fantasy. That is a kitchen windowsill with the right 6 plants in the right 6 containers, managed the way Farmstead kitchens managed them for 200 years, before the grocery store convinced us that fresh herbs were something you bought in a plastic bag and threw half of away. I am going to show you exactly how to set that windowsill up. Which 6 herbs, what containers, what soil, how to water them so they do not die in the first month, the way most windowsill herb kits do. And one specific growing trick for each plant that most gardening guides never mention. The trick that turns a struggling pot of herbs into something that produces continuously all year long. Stay with me through herb 4 especially. There is a harvesting technique for that plant that is completely counterintuitive. And it is the reason most people's basil turns bitter and bolts within 6 weeks, while a properly managed plant produces for 8 months without stopping. Who this is? From my name is Jacob Mercer. I run Jacob's Farmstead on a 1/4 acre in the Midwest. Most of what I cover on this channel is about growing food the way it was grown before convenience made us dependent on things we do not need to be dependent on. Today is about the smallest version of that. 6 square feet of kitchen windowsill that feed a household with fresh herbs 12 months of the year. I first started paying attention to kitchen herb growing when I was documenting traditional household practices in Amish communities in Lancaster County. Every kitchen I walked into had herbs on the sill, not grocery store pots, the thin plastic ones sold in supermarkets that die within 2 weeks because they were grown in pure peat with no real root structure. Proper plants in proper soil, in containers that had been chosen deliberately, tended by women who knew exactly how much water each plant wanted and exactly how to harvest it so it kept producing. A woman named Anna Byler showed me her windowsill. 6 pots. Same 6 plants, she told me, that her mother had kept and her grandmother before that. She had not bought a bunch of fresh herbs from a store in 11 years. Everything the kitchen needed came from those 6 pots, and the pots had been producing continuously without replacement for 4 growing seasons. That conversation changed how I thought about kitchen growing. It is not a project. It is not a hobby. It is a system. And once the system is set up right, it runs itself. Here is the system. The foundation. Before the first plant goes. In most windowsill herb gardens fail in the first month. Not because of wrong plants or neglect, because of 2 foundational mistakes made before a single pot is placed. Mistake 1. The wrong container. The thin plastic pots supermarket herbs come in are transport containers, not growing containers. The plant was grown in a greenhouse and placed in that pot for the journey to the shelf. It was never designed to stay there. Roots have nowhere to go. Water pools and rots them within weeks. Every herb on this list needs proper drainage holes at the bottom, multiple holes, and enough depth for the root system to develop. Minimum 6 inches deep, 6 inches wide. 8 inches is better. Terracotta is the best material because it breathes. Moisture evaporates through the walls as well as the drainage holes, which means the soil dries more evenly, and root rot becomes nearly impossible. 6 terracotta pots at 6 to 8 inches costs between $18 and $30 at any garden center. This is the only structural cost that matters. Mistake 2. The wrong soil. Standard bagged potting mix holds too much moisture for indoor windowsill conditions and compacts over time in a way that suffocates roots. The mix Anna Baylor used, and that I have used for 9 years, is 2 parts potting mix, 1 part coarse perlite or coarse sand, and a small handful of worm castings per pot if available. The perlite opens the soil structure so water drains freely. The worm castings provide slow-release nutrition for months without additional fertilizing. This mix drains fast, dries evenly, and does not compact. It is the soil environment that Mediterranean herbs evolved in: rocky, fast-draining, lean, but alive. Get these 2 things right, and every herb on this list will thrive. Get them wrong, and no amount of care will save the plants. Now, the 6 herbs. Herb 1. Thyme, the one that asks for almost nothing. Thyme is the herb that requires the least from the grower and gives the most in return. It is the herb to start with if you are new to windowsill growing because it builds confidence. It is genuinely difficult to kill, and because it is useful in the kitchen in a way few other herbs match. Thyme goes into braises, roasted meats, soups, compound butters, marinades. Dried thyme from the grocery store is a pale substitute for fresh thyme cut directly from the plant. The volatile oils that give thyme its flavor degrade within hours of harvest. The bunch in the plastic clamshell has already lost most of its flavor by the time it reaches your kitchen. A windowsill plant has lost none. The growing secret with thyme is sun and restraint. It wants the most direct sun of any herb on this list, south-facing, 5 to 6 hours minimum. And it wants to dry out almost completely between waterings. Stick your finger into the soil. If there is any moisture in the top 2 inches, do not water. When the soil is genuinely dry 1.5 inches down, water thoroughly until it drains from the bottom. Then wait again. Most people water thyme on a schedule. Thyme does not know what day it is. Water it when it is dry, not when the calendar says to. Harvest by snipping the top 2 to 3 inches of each stem, never more than 1/3 of the plant at once. The plant will branch at the cut, producing 2 new stems for every one removed. A well-harvested thyme plant becomes denser and more productive with each cutting and will produce continuously for 2 to 3 years. Herb 2. Chives, the herb that grows itself back in days. Chives are the fastest returning herb on this list. Cut them to within 1 inch of the soil and they will be back to full harvest height in 7 to 10 days. This makes them ideal for the cook who wants something available constantly. Chives are always there, always ready, always regrowing faster than you can use them. In the kitchen, chives replace buying spring onions for garnish and finishing. Scrambled eggs, baked potatoes, soups, salads, compound butters, dips. Chives finish almost everything with a mild onion flavor that store-bought bunches cannot match for freshness. The growing secret: chives are a bulb plant. Below the soil is a cluster of small bulbs that expands over time. A 2-season chive plant is 4 times as productive as a first-year plant. They get better with age, the opposite of most grocery store herb pots designed as single use. Chives want moderate to good light, south or east facing, and consistent moisture. Unlike thyme, they do not want to dry out completely. Keep the top inch moist, but not wet. Every 2 to 3 years, lift the whole plant, divide the bulb cluster into 2 or 3 clumps, and repot each one separately. This gives you more plants from one original purchase and keeps production at full capacity. Herb 3. Mint. Keep it alone and it will reward you. Mint has one rule that overrides everything else. It must grow alone. Never plant mint with other herbs. Its roots spread horizontally and will take over any shared container within a season, choking out every other root system. In its own pot, mint is one of the most generous herbs you can grow. It produces abundantly, returns from hard cutting within days, and asks for very little light. It goes in the shaded corner where nothing else would thrive. In the kitchen, fresh mint changes drinks, desserts, salads, and grain dishes in a way dried mint completely fails to replicate. The volatile oils responsible for mint's character begin degrading immediately after harvest. Fresh is the only version worth growing for. The growing secret is water and hard cutting. Mint evolved along stream banks and wants consistent moisture. Let it dry out, and it wilts. It recovers quickly once watered, but do not make it a habit. Keep it evenly moist, and cut it hard. When stems get long and leggy, cut the whole plant back by half. It responds with a flush of new bushy growth more flavorful than the old. A mint plant cut hard twice a season outperforms one left to grow unchecked every time. Spearmint is the most versatile variety for kitchen use. Start with spearmint. Add peppermint once the system is established. Herb 4. Basil, the counterintuitive harvest that changes everything. Here is what I told you to stay for. Most people's basil turns bitter and goes to seed within 6 weeks of bringing it home. They blame the plant, they blame the light, they buy another pot and the same thing happens. The problem is not the plant and it is not the light. The problem is how they are harvesting it. Most people pick basil by pulling individual leaves from the stem. The big leaves at the bottom first because they are the largest and seem the most useful. This is exactly backwards. Picking the bottom leaves tells the plant that its lower growth is what is being consumed and triggers it to keep growing upward, stretching toward the light, producing flower buds at the top, converting its energy from leaf production to seed production. A basil plant that has been bottom-picked is a basil plant on its way to bolting, regardless of temperature or light. The correct technique, the one Anna Byler used without being able to explain the botany behind it, the one she learned from her mother, is to always harvest from the top. Find the tallest stem on the plant. Follow it down to the first or second pair of leaves below the tip. Cut just above that leaf pair with sharp scissors. 2 things happen immediately. The tip that was stretching upward, the part that would have become a flower stem, is removed, and the cut point now has 2 growing buds directly below it, one on each side, that will each become new stems. One cut produces 2 branches. 2 branches harvested correctly produce 4. A basil plant harvested this way becomes bushier, denser, and more productive with every harvest instead of taller, leggier, and closer to bolting. Additionally, remove every flower bud the moment it appears. Do not let basil flower. The moment a basil plant successfully flowers and begins producing seed, it considers its work done and declines rapidly. Pinch every bud, every single one. Immediately, the plant will try again within a week. Pinch it again. This ongoing removal of flower buds, combined with top-down harvesting, is what keeps a basil plant producing continuously for 8 months rather than burning out in 6 weeks. Basil wants the most warmth of any herb on this list. Keep it away from cold glass in winter. A south-facing window with supplemental grow light in the shortest days of the year will carry it through. Water when the top inch of soil is dry, not before, not much after. One basil plant, managed correctly, produces enough for a household through the growing season and into winter. Most people have never experienced what that feels like, because most people harvest their basil from the bottom up and wonder why it dies. Herb 5. Parsley, the slow starter that pays for months. Parsley is the one herb on this list that rewards patience. It is slow to establish. The first 4 to 6 weeks after planting it seems to do almost nothing. The temptation is to assume something is wrong. Nothing is wrong. Parsley puts energy underground first, building a deep taproot before investing in above-ground growth. Leave it alone. Once established, typically 8 weeks after transplanting, parsley enters a phase of continuous, generous production lasting the better part of 2 seasons. It is a biennial, leaves in year 1, flowers and seed in year 2, then done. A first-year plant harvested regularly will produce throughout the entire growing season and often through winter and into the following spring. Grow flat-leaf Italian parsley, more flavor, more versatile than curly parsley, which is better as decoration than food. Fresh parsley finishes soups, pasta, eggs, roasted vegetables, and grain dishes in a way dried parsley, which has almost no flavor, cannot approach. The growing secret: always harvest the outer stems first, the oldest growth around the perimeter, and leave the inner new growth to develop. This is the opposite of basil's top-down approach because parsley grows from the center outward. Take the outside, leave the inside, and the plant continually pushes new growth from the center to replace what was removed. Parsley wants consistent moisture and moderate light. An east-facing window or a south window with some afternoon shade works well. Let the top inch dry, then water. Herb 6. Rosemary, the long game. Rosemary is the longest investment on this list and the longest return. A rosemary plant established in the right conditions does not need replacing. It grows slowly, asks for very little, and rewards a patient household with years of continuous harvest from a single plant that becomes more productive as it matures. The growing secret, and this is what most windowsill rosemary plants die from getting wrong, is drainage above everything else. Rosemary evolved on rocky Mediterranean hillsides in thin, fast-draining soil with low rainfall and abundant sun. It is physiologically intolerant of wet roots. Root rot develops without obvious above-ground symptoms until the plant is already past saving. The soil mix described earlier, 2 parts potting mix, 1 part coarse perlite, is especially critical for rosemary. Water thoroughly, then wait until the soil is genuinely dry before watering again. In a well-draining container, that means once every 10 to 14 days in winter, every 5 to 7 days in summer. Rosemary wants the sunniest position on the windowsill. South-facing, full sun, no taller plants blocking the light. In the darkest winter months, a small grow light run 4 to 6 hours above the plant will carry it through without decline. Harvest by snipping the top 2 to 3 inches of young green stems only. Never cut into the woody brown stems at the base. The plant does not regenerate from old wood. Stay on the green growth, and with each harvest, the plant branches and thickens, eventually becoming a small woody shrub that produces more than any household kitchen can realistically use. Putting the windowsill together. Here is the placement logic for a standard kitchen window. Sunniest position, center of the sill, rosemary and thyme. Highest light plants, they keep their environment warm and dry. Slightly shadier position, basil and parsley. Both want good light, but not the full intensity of rosemary and thyme. Keep basil away from cold drafts from window gaps in winter. Separate pot, shaded corner, or east-facing secondary window. Mint, alone, always. Remaining spot, flexible. Chives, most light adaptable of the 6, will perform in almost any position with 3 or more hours of indirect light per day. Water in the morning, not at night. Evening watering leaves moisture on leaves and in soil through cold night hours, encouraging mold and root rot. Morning water allows the day's warmth to evaporate surface moisture naturally. Feed once a month in the growing season with diluted liquid fertilizer, half the recommended dose. These are not heavy feeders. Too much fertilizer produces fast, lush growth with reduced flavor. The volatile oils that make herbs worth eating are produced in higher concentrations when the plant grows at a moderate, slightly lean pace. Sparse feeding gives you more flavor. Overfeeding gives you more leaves and less of what makes them worth growing. The close Anna Beeler had 6 pots on her windowsill, the same 6 plants her mother kept, and her grandmother before that. She had not bought a bunch of fresh herbs from a store in 11 years. Not because she was unusually skilled, but because once the system was set up correctly, the 6 plants ran themselves. The setup costs between $18 and $30 in containers and perhaps $15 in plants and soil. Total first investment, under $50. Annual value produced against what the same herbs cost in grocery store clamshells, $150 to $250 per year. Return on the $50 investment, 3 to 5 times. Every year after the first costs almost nothing. Start this weekend. 1 trip to the garden center, 6 terracotta pots, 6 plants. the right soil mix, the right windowsill position, and the 6 harvesting techniques: thyme from the tips, chives from the base, mint cut hard twice a season, basil always from the top with every flower bud removed, parsley from the outside in, rosemary from the young green growth only. The system runs itself once it is set up. Right plants, right conditions, right small habits, then left alone to do what they were designed to do. Tell me in the comments which herb has failed you before. I will tell you exactly which mistake in this video was the reason. I read everyone. And if your grandmother kept herbs on her windowsill that seemed to produce forever, share the variety, the window, the way she harvested. That knowledge belongs here. Subscribe to Jacob's Farmstead for the next video, where I will show you how to take cuttings from these 6 plants and propagate everyone for free, so a single rosemary plant becomes 6 and you never buy a herb plant again. Until then, get the pots, get the soil right, harvest the basil from the top. The windowsill has been feeding households for 200 years. It will feed yours too.